The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., September 18, 2023. I hereby appoint the Honorable Kevin Hern to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 9, 2023, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with time equally allocated between the parties and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes. But in no event shall debate continue debate beyond 1:50 p.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Joyce, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since President Biden took office, there have been over 5.8 million illegal crossings on our southern border, and 1.6 million illegal immigrants have evaded apprehension. Instead of funding our Border Patrol agents to deal with the rise in attempted crossings, President Biden has chosen to incentivize crossings by ending President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. At a time when the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45 is overdoses, Democrats' failure to pass comprehensive border security legislation is an indictment of their failure to protect the American people. Instead of addressing the importation of fentanyl-related substances, liberals in this body have voted against legislation like HALT Fentanyl Act, which is legislation that would permanently classify these drugs as Schedule I narcotics and impose harsh penalties on the dealers who traffic these deadly poisons. In the past year, I've spoken with too many first responders who have administered Narcan on 911 calls. I've spoken with too many county coroners conducting autopsies on young people killed far too much by fentanyl poisonings. And I've spoken with far too many families who have lost a loved one to an overdose. It is time for the Senate to stop sitting on the sidelines while Americans suffer and Americans die. It's time to pass the HALT Fentanyl Act. It is time to secure our border. Our top priority must be to protect our nation's border and put a stop to drug smuggling and illegal immigration that has made every state in our union a border state. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield.
The Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Garcia, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to a lost hero. This past Saturday evening around 6 p.m., L.A. County Sheriff Deputy Ryan Klinkenbroomer was ambushed and brutally executed while sitting in his patrol vehicle in broad daylight in my district's the Antelope Valley. At the young age of just 30 years old, Ryan had proposed to his beautiful fiancée, Brittany, just 4 days before he was murdered. He was a field training officer and was by all accounts one of the best sheriffs in the Palmdale station. Ryan was a third-generation sheriff. His dad, Mike, served as a sheriff as well as his grandfather. Mr. Speaker, there are no words that can give solace to his family and to his fellow sheriffs in the station. The healing will take decades, and even then we'll only just begin to close these very deep wounds. And this morning, his killer, his alleged killer, was apprehended. In the midst of the unbearable pain, we, Mr. Speaker, have an obligation to seek justice and to seek a full accountability. We have an obligation to compel all elected officials at all levels of government and all citizens, regardless of political party, to unequivocally support our precious and vulnerable police officers, not just with words, but also with resources, not just with resources, but also with respect. The killing of a police officer should be a federal felony, punishable by death or life in prison, and I will do all that I can to make sure that that happens. It's an indication of a failing society and a failing culture that develops a human being that is comfortable with executing a hero like Deputy Ryan Klinkenbroomer. Ryan served every day of his life with honor and dignity to protect the good guys from the bad guys. He did it right. We owe him and his family and his fellow law enforcement officers a level of gratitude that will never be sufficient. And as hard as we may try to appreciate what they've done, it will still only just be at the feet of their towering service and sacrifices. Praise be to God and his Son, the Father of compassion, to give the Klinkenbroomer family comfort now and at their darkest hours. May he and we hold Ryan's killer accountable with the fury of 1,000 suns. I implore the District Attorney Gascon of Los Angeles to file maximum charges against his alleged killer. And may God be with Ryan by his side, protect and bless our police officers every day who put their lives on the line while they provide the rest of us our security blanket. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to my good friend and former mayor of Glendale and a mentor, Mr. Carl Raggio, who passed away on June 20th of this year. Carl, despite his years of 95 of age, remained a wise and sprightly man until he left us. He was a resident of my hometown, Santa Clarita, and Carl was a family man. He's survived by a lovely bride of 72 years, Miss Lynn, as well as their sons Carl and Paul and their daughter Lisa, 15 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren. Carl was, in fact, a rocket scientist. Working at JPL for 39 years, he was instrumental in the design of several pioneering spacecraft, including Explorer 1, which was the first satellite launched by the United States into space in 1958. And he did it all with just a slide rule. Can you imagine that? Today, Carl is in heaven, flying higher than any spacecraft he developed in this world. Godspeed, Carl Raggio, and thank you for your love of country and your service to our beautiful nation. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of my colleagues who have called for an increase in funding for our border security and to remind the nation that the U.S. border in Guam ought to be defended too. As we continue to discuss and debate solutions to our southern border crisis, I ask that we not forget to secure all our border cities, from Barnesville to Hagåtña. My colleagues, Chinese nationalists are arriving on the shores of Guam in drones, often coming in small boats from neighboring islands. Among the many honest people looking to flee tyranny and find sanctuary on American soil, it is known fact that spies have exploited this insecure border. Security forces at Andersen Air Force Base have told me on numerous occasions that they have apprehended such intruders. Citing our low terror threat, the Department of Homeland Security currently designates less than 1% of Homeland Security grant fundings to Guam. The Department of Homeland Security assessment of the situation ignores the reality and its red flags for national security. Guam has an extremely permeable border and is facing vigorous efforts by the CCP to exploit our vulnerabilities. With resources on a scale of a municipality, Guam must contend with a border crisis caused by the Chinese state. Guam needs more funding for immigration and customs enforcement, a more robust Coast Guard presence, and a federal law enforcement presence proportional to the scope of the immigration issues. transnational crime, and military intelligence vulnerabilities on my island. Mr. Speaker, I cannot let this moment pass without asking my colleagues to help me fund the defense of my community. I ask my colleagues to help me secure the border by securing all of America's borders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Arizona, Mr. Stanton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to honor the life and legacy of a great Phoenician, Frank Barrios. Frank was a giant among us, a champion for the Latino community, a renowned conservationist, and a historian who preserved the legacy of generations gone by. A second-generation Arizonan, Frank spent his career working to preserve our most precious resource, water. As a young hydrologist, he worked for the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and later the Arizona Department of Water Resources. He played pivotal roles during key moments in Arizona's water history, from planning the Central Arizona Project to groundwater management. Even after retirement, Frank found many ways to serve. He was appointed by Governor Janet Napolitano to the Central Arizona Water Conservation District Board of Directors, where he served with distinction, ensuring that even amidst the state's rapid growth, our water resources were well managed. A man of deep faith, he spent his later years caring for our most vulnerable neighbors as president of the enormously impactful St. Vincent de Paul Society. Frank knew the healing power of St. Vincent de Paul. His deep love for Phoenix was obvious to anyone who had the good fortune of crossing paths with him, particularly through his work chronicling and preserving the rich Mexican-American history in the valley. He fought to restore the historically Latino Sotolo Herd Cemetery in South Phoenix after years of neglect, and honor those who found eternal rest there. And he's perhaps best known for writing the book Mexicans in Phoenix, documenting more than a century of Mexican-American life, culture, and political activism in our valley. His meticulous research, gathered oral histories, and archival photographs were endowed by the Arizona Historical Society, a precious gift for future generations. There's no doubt that Frank Barrios lived a full and remarkable life. But what stands out most was not just his achievements on paper, but the way he achieved them. It was his unwavering kindness, generosity, and humility. We lost Frank at the age of 81 on September 11, 2023, but his profound legacy will always live on. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Kane, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize the life and the service of Captain David Wallace, a United States Navy veteran and permanent military professor who passed away at the age of 48 on Monday, December 26, 2022. David was born in Stockton, New Jersey. He attended the U.S. Naval Academy, USNA, in Annapolis, Maryland, where he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in economics in 1996. He later returned to USNA and earned a Master of Science degree in Information Technology Management from the Naval Postgraduate School. David served in the Navy on active duty for over 20 years as a surface warfare officer. He served aboard the USS John S. McCain, the USS Haler, and USS Mustin. In 2012, he commanded Coastal Riverine Group 2 Detachment Bahrain and a task force group in Manama, Bahrain. On shore, David worked at U.S. Joint Forces Command, assessing and developing practices in humanitarian assistance, counterinsurgency operations, and foreign internal defense and stability operations. He also served as Deputy Director for Professional Development at the USNA from 2010 to 2011. In 2013, David was selected for the USNA Permanent Military Professor Program, earning his PhD in Industrial Organizational Psychology in 2017. from George Mason University. Since 2020, David has served the Department of Chair of the USNA Leadership, Ethics, and Law LEL Department, while also working as an adjunct faculty at the George Mason University and at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, teaching graduate courses. David was a highly decorated veteran, earning the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, 3 Navy Commendation Medals, 2 Navy Achievement Medals, and numerous unit, campaign, and service awards. In 2022, David received a nomination by LEL Department for the USNA Military Professor Teaching Award, his 2nd Meritorious Service Medal, and his promotion to Associate Professor. Above all, professionally, David loved fostering the spirit and leadership in the Navy and throughout his community. Outside of his career, David loved to pursue his hobbies of sailing, boating, and home improvement with his wife, Valerie. Last December, David tragically lost his 2-year battle with cancer. I'm grateful for his service and dedication to educating future military leaders. In recognition of his exemplary service, David was posthumously promoted to the rank of captain on April 25th, 2023. He is survived by his wife, Valerie, with whom he shared 25 years of marriage, and his 3 daughters, Savannah, Madeline, and Emma. May his memory be a blessing to his family, to his colleagues in the Navy, and to his community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the Allegheny National Forest Centennial. For the last 100 years, the only national forest in Pennsylvania has been a shining example of what a multiple-use forest can do and be for a region. This great forest wasn't always this vibrant. Prior to President Calvin Coolidge signing a proclamation establishing the Allegheny National Forest, or what we refer to as ANF, in 1923, there was considerable deforestation throughout the Pennsylvania's northern tier. This was a result of unsustainable and poor forestry practices in the 19th century and early 20th century. A century later, forests throughout the region have largely been restored, and forest health has returned across the landscape by applying science and active forest management. Located in the northern portion of my district, this incredible forest spans more than 500,000 acres across Forest, Elk, McKean, and Warren counties. Whether it is timber harvesting, energy production, wildlife habitat, or an abundance of outdoor activities, the Allegheny National Forest has it all. The ANF is the economic engine of the region, supporting local jobs and industry as well as recreational opportunities for residents and visitors alike. The ANF is an important partner to the forest products industry, which is incredibly important for this region for both economic needs and encouraging forest health. The local logging and forest products industry play important roles in supporting the Forest Service's mandate to actively manage national forests and ensure a reliable source of domestic timber. The Allegheny National Forest is also located in the same area as Pennsylvania's historic oil region, which began in 1859 when Colonel Edwin Drake drilled the world's first commercially successful well in Titusville, Pennsylvania. The oil and gas industry has been a staple industry in the northwestern Pennsylvania, established long before the ANF was even created. Today, energy production in the ANF continues to be a critical economic driver in the region, while the Forest Service remain an important partner with local producers and mineral rights owners. Mr. Speaker, this centennial is a grand celebration as it highlights the importance of maintaining our multiple-use forests. To celebrate, the community is hosting a variety of activities leading up to the celebration on Sunday, September 24th. Events include a Jake's Rocks mountain bike trail fest, a forest-themed art show, a forest-themed film festival, and ending with a birthday party on Sunday the 24th, taking place at the Twin Lakes Recreational Area. The ANF is a nature lover's dream and continues to be a prime vacation destination for Pennsylvanians as well as Americans and even international travelers. While there are numerous hiking, biking, and even snowmobile trails, the ANF also provides key resources to sustain our country. From renowned hardwoods to biomass fuels for energy production, the ANF truly provides something for everyone. For generations, the forest has brought economic prosperity to our region, and it is essential that we're able to contribute to the longevity and sustainability of the Allegheny National Forest. I'm dedicated to putting forth policies that promote natural solutions to keep our forests healthy and resilient for generations to come. These policies include working closely with the Forest Service, a division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, to manage our forests, foster healthy lands, and allow this economic engine to thrive. By supporting the Forest Service and encouraging active management, we can support healthy forests and rural communities for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to represent the only national forest in Pennsylvania. I will continue to support policies here in Washington that allow for the ANF to flourish for the next 100 years and beyond. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the life of my constituent and World War II veteran, William Norman Parker, who passed away on September 11th as an American hero. Mr. Parker was one of the first soldiers to arrive on Omaha Beach on D-Day in 1944. Mr. Parker and his fellow soldiers displayed incredible heroism on that fateful day and the terrible days that followed. Their courage and patriotism represent the very best of the American spirit. In July of this year, Mr. Parker returned to Omaha Beach for the first time since that day 78 years ago. I can only imagine how he felt standing on that calm beach then with the traumatic memories from that summer when he was just 19 years old, risking life and limb for the future of this country. My prayer is that he found peace on that beach and returned home feeling the pride and gratitude of the nation he fought for. Whether it be on the Omaha Beach or at Ground Zero, America has always stood for freedom and will continue to make that stand. My thoughts and prayers are with Bill's friends, his family, and beloved veteran community as he is laid to rest today in Oklahoma. May this hero rest in peace for always and forever. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until 2 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Holy God, we dare to approach you this day, knowing full well that despite our best efforts, no one of us is righteous. No one of us is without blame. All of us have sinned and fallen short of your glory. We dare, however, to pray that in your justice you will be merciful to us as we strive to bring honor to you in this day that you have provided. In hope, we pray that in your discipline you will guide us in the way we should go, that in our life and our work, whatever we do would bring glory to you. In this quiet moment, we yield to your will and ask that in the more challenging moments that lie ahead of us, Holy God, you would be in our heads and in our thinking. God, be in our eyes and in our looking. God, be in our mouths and in our speaking. O God, be in our hearts and in our understanding. In your everlasting name we pray. Amen.
The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Iowa seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to celebrate a remarkable collaboration between Cold Zero Premium Spirits and Cedar Ridge Distillery that embodies the spirit of giving back and honoring our veterans. Casey Maxted, a former Green Beret, brought together friends and colleagues from the military and co-founded Cold Zero in Swisher, Iowa. This year, members of Cold Zero Spirits and Cedar Ridge Distillery spent the 22nd anniversary of 9/11 terror attacks bottling whiskey. Over 2,000 bottles of this special whiskey will be available, and each bottle is signed by one of 6 Medal of Honor recipients, including Cedar Rapids native Sal Ginta. As we approach Veterans Day, let us remember the profound impact we can have on the lives of our veterans by rallying around organizations and businesses who support them and are also veteran-owned. Thank you, Cold Zero Premium Spirits and Cedar Ridge Distillery, for your inspiring efforts to make a difference. I'd also like to wish a very happy birthday to the most special man in my life, my husband, Kurt Meeks. Happy birthday, honey. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what reasons does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The irresponsible policies of Biden and the liberal Democrats have caused a 40-year high inflation, leaving American families in financial distress and jobs destroyed. Biden inflation has affected the cost of everyday goods and services and limited the annual purchasing power of families by thousands of dollars. Worse, Biden does not seem to comprehend the reality of these decisions, proven when recently describing his economic policies. Biden said, quote, "I don't know what Bidenomics is, but it's working," end of quote. Among the most damaging effects on families is the highest seasonal gas price in more than a decade, with the national average at over $3.80 a gallon. Sadly, American auto workers are being sacrificed to create dependency on Chinese batteries. The Republican House majority is working to correct this, having recently passed the Lower Energy Cost Act to streamline the permitting process and reduce energy cost to achieve energy independence, which President Donald Trump had achieved in his administration. In conclusion, God bless our troops who successfully protected America for 20 years as the global war on terrorism continues, moving from the Afghanistan safe haven to America with Biden open borders. I yield back.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to shed light on pyruvate dehydrogenase complex deficiency, commonly known as PDCD. This incurable and extremely rare mitochondrial metabolic condition, which manifests at birth, prohibits patients from properly transforming carbohydrates into energy, instead turning them into lactic acid that causes painful seizures and developmental delays. I recently met with Rick and Kim Higbee, a family in Jacksonville, Florida, who have experienced the challenges of PDCD firsthand. Their daughter, Harlow, pictured beside me, began to show signs of PDCD as an infant. And as any parent knows, when there is something wrong with your child, you will move heaven and earth to get answers and provide them for their care. Sadly, since PDCD does not currently appear on infant screening lists, the Higbee family waited 9 painstakingly long months before they had a name for Harlow's condition and were able to begin treatment. Thanks to the doctors, nurses, and specialists at UF Health in Jacksonville and her own fighting spirit, 3-year-old Harlow has defied the odds. This week, World Mitochondrial Disease Week, I am proud to join the Higbee family and thousands of others in advocating for PDCD to be added to the infant screening list and for additional research funding to go toward finding a cure. Early detection and diagnosis can mean the difference between life and death for more than 15 million children. On behalf of Florida's 5th Congressional District, I'm committed to ensuring families in our community, like the Higbees, are supported in their fight to eradicate this condition. God bless Harlow and all of our children living with PDCD. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, I write to inform you that I am resigning my position as the member of the United States Congress representing the 2nd Congressional District of Utah, effective at the close of the day of September 15, 2023. It has been the honor of my lifetime to represent the 2nd Congressional District of Utah in the United States House of Representatives, and I am eternally grateful for the trust and faith that the people of the 2nd District placed in me to serve as their member of Congress for the past 11 years. Enclosed, please find a copy of the letter I have submitted to Utah Governor Spencer J. Cox. Sincerely, Chris Stewart, Member of Congress.
Under Clause 5D of Rule 20, the chair announces to the House that in light of the resignation of the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Chris Stewart, the whole number of the House is now 433. And does a gentlelady from Wisconsin seek recognition?
I'd like recognition for 1 minute and be able to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to appeal to the majority here to not make draconian cuts to the Women, Infant, and Children program. What is before us is a proposal to cut $800 million out of the fruit and vegetables portion of the WIC program. Study after study has shown that WIC improves birth outcomes, reduces the likelihood of preterm births and low birth weights, helps lactating mothers, and as of May, WIC has already served an average of 6.6 million monthly participants. I just want to remind you that this is our future workforce, and how we treat these babies is what shows us who is right to life and who is not. You want to be a right to life person, feed the babies. With that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlelady's time has expired. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess, subject to call of the chair.
The House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote of the yeas or nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3981 as amended.
Thank you. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 153, H.R. 3981, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to improve the methods by which the Secretary of Veterans Affairs conducts oversight of certain educational institutions and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 3981 as amended.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 3981 as amended. This bill makes improvements to protect veterans while they are using their GI Bill. Specifically, this bill would require schools to self-report adverse actions to their state approving agencies in addition to the VA within 30 days. State approving agencies are required to approve and review school and training programs for and of the GI Bill. This bill would also require VA to create a risk-based survey database within 180 days. You know, Congress has been waiting for the VA to implement this database for a long time. This proposal would make it clear to the VA that Congress still intends for this database to be implemented. Now, I appreciate the bipartisan work that has been done at the committee level to ensure that this bill supports veterans while also not increasing government spending. Now, I thank Mr. McGarvey for his work in introducing this proposal. Now, I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 3981 as amended. And with that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois' time, the gentleman from Illinois is reserved, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to express my support for H.R. 3981 as amended, the Veterans Education Oversight Expansion Act. Madam Speaker, before I came to Congress, I was a teacher, and so when I was entrusted with the gavel as chairman of the Veterans Committee in 2019, one of my primary focuses was helping student veterans. I now serve as ranking member. However, I'm incredibly proud of what our committee did during our 4 years in the majority. In 2021, we passed a significant student veteran-focused law. Representative Mike Levin's Isaacson-Rowe Veterans Health Care and Benefits Improvement Act, named for former House and Senate Chairman Phil Rowe and Johnny Isaacson. That law was a massive leap forward in education quality and oversight for student veterans. Representative Garvey's legislation, H.R. 3981, builds upon the Isaacson-Rowe Act and further improves the system of oversight we established in the 2021 law. Now schools will join the process of reporting violations, no longer waiting for state approving agencies or VA to uncover errors before it is too late. The legislation before us also improves transparency for the risk-based surveys created by Isaacson-Rowe. VA started conducting these surveys in late 2022, but schools need to know how these surveys work so they can better deliver for our student veterans. So the legislation improves schools' access to risk-based survey database. Madam Speaker, thank you, and I again support H.R. 3981 as amended, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Madam Speaker, I have no speakers at this time, so I reserve.
The gentleman reserves, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend who is a member of our subcommittee on economic opportunity and also sponsor of H.R. 3981, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Representative Garvey.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 3981, the Isaacson-Rowe Education Oversight Expansion Act. I am proud to sponsor this legislation, which builds on Ranking Member Levin's comprehensive bill, the Isaacson-Rowe Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act of 2020. My hometown and district in Louisville, Kentucky, is home to nearly 50,000 veterans. Veterans in Louisville and across our country deserve as much support from the government when they came out of active duty as when they go in. Today, we have an opportunity to show our vets that we're listening to their concerns and that we're going to do something about it. H.R. 3981 will help VA deliver on the promises it makes to service members when they join the military. It improves oversight of and fosters accountability at institutions that receive GI Bill funding, ensuring that the men and women who put on the uniform to defend our country aren't defrauded by dishonest institutions that fail to set our veterans up for success. H.R. 3981 is a common sense bipartisan bill which came out of our committee on a bipartisan basis. It will ensure our veterans and their benefits are supported and protected. We have a sacred responsibility to look after all Americans, especially those who have sacrificed for our country. Any veteran who wants to get an education they have earned, should be able to do so without fear of being defrauded, losing their benefits, or being left behind. Every man and woman who puts on a uniform is willing to risk everything to keep us safe. The least we can do is protect them when they get home. Veterans earn their GI Bill education benefits, and no veteran should lose that benefit to bad actors or fraudulent institutions, not a single one. I would like to thank Chairman Bost, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Takano and Levin, and all those involved for their leadership in support of this bill. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3981, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close. I reserve.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 3981 as amended, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Madam Speaker, once again, I want to encourage the members on our side of the aisle and all of our colleagues to support this good piece of legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3981 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair?
On that, I request
in the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed and without objection.
Madam Speaker,
yes.
On that, I request yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this bill by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number have risen. The yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. So, for what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1530, Veterans Benefits Improvement Act of 2023 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 162, H.R. 1530, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to improve the requirement to publish disability benefit questionnaire forms of the Department of Veterans Affairs and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 1530 as amended.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1530 as amended, offered by my friend from Texas and our Subcommittee on Disability Assistance Memorial Affairs Chairman, Representative Luttrell. I would like to congratulate Representative Luttrell on this bill, as it is his first one to come before the floor since coming to Congress. Now, this bill would make it vitally important improvements to the VA disability claims process for veterans applying for benefits, and I am grateful to my fellow veteran for his work on it. Yeah, no, it is no secret that the VA disability claims is lengthy and difficult. But Mr. Luttrell's bill is the right solution to modernize the process. An example of which would be the requirement for VA to publish disability benefits questionnaires forms on VA's websites to ease access between veterans and providers completing disability claims. This is a common sense change that honestly we should have done a long time ago. This bill also includes Representative Casamani's legislation to create a new internship program at the Board of Veterans' Appeals. This program would offer certain incentives to legal interns to get them into VA and fighting for veterans, while also addressing hiring and retention challenges at the board head on. Lastly, this bill includes Representative Self's proposal to make sure that the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims has enough judges to process the backlog of appeals, but expecting growth since the passage of the PACT Act last year. These common sense solutions should help us make the claims process a little easier to navigate for veterans and their families. It would also provide the court with additional resources we know they need to manage the workload coming in from the board. Now, once again, I'd like to thank Representative Luttrell, Mr. Self, and Mr. Casamani for their work on this legislation. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1530 as amended. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I rise to express my support for H.R. 1530 as amended, the Veterans Benefits Improvement Act. I want to thank Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs Subcommittee Chairman Luttrell and Ranking Member Pappas for working in a bipartisan manner on the issues in this package. I commend Representative Ciscomani and Representative McGarvey for their contributions as well. Madam Speaker, this bill makes several important changes that will serve to help streamline the medical disability exam process for veterans. It will also help strengthen recruitment, hiring, and retention at the Board of Veterans' Appeals by creating a new internship program for law students, and will expand the reimbursement programs for current employees to include student loans, professional development activities, and bar dues. This bill will also permanently expand the number of judges appointed to the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, allowing the court to process cases faster and grant veterans and survivors the relief they deserve. I support H.R. 1530 as amended. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the DAMA committee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am honored to be here today to talk about H.R. 1530 as amended, the Veterans Benefit Improvement Act of 2023. We have an obligation to support our veterans who served and sacrificed for our country. However, there is currently a lot of red tape that prevents veterans from easily accessing the disability benefits they have earned from the VA. This bill takes important steps to identify and break down these barriers in the disability exam process, ensuring our veterans receive the highest quality care and support. This bill would make several improvements, including clarifying publishing requirements for disability benefits questionnaire forms on VA's website, ease communications about the scheduling of disability exams between contract examiners, veterans, and veterans representatives so that the veterans do not miss their appointments. I would like to thank Ranking Member Pappas and my colleagues, Ciscomani and Self, for working with me to include their respective legislation in this amendment. All of their provisions will take steps to provide VA with the resources they need to address the backlog of appeals, especially since the passage of the PACT Act last year, as well as mitigate the recruiting and retention problems at the board to get new lawyers in the door for our veterans. I know firsthand how cumbersome the disability claims process can be, and it is past time to modernize these efforts. I am proud to have a bill on the floor that will make improvements for my fellow veterans going through the VA claims process. I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 1530 as amended, and I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you, Chairman Ball.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend who is the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs, House Veterans Affairs Committee, the gentleman from New Hampshire, Mr. Pappas.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Ranking Member Takano, for yielding. I rise today in support of this bipartisan legislation, the Veterans Benefits Improvement Act. And as Ranking Member of the Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs Subcommittee, I'm honored to be able to partner with the subcommittee's chair, Mr. Luttrell, on this legislation. I want to thank him for working in a bipartisan fashion to ensure that our veterans can access the benefits and services that they are owed. We all have a solemn obligation to ensure that the needs of veterans are met. But we know that too many of our heroes encounter red tape, delays, and backlogs when trying to access benefits. My office has spoken with countless veterans across New Hampshire who have had trouble completing and filing disability benefit questionnaires due to a lack of clear and timely communication. Often our office will step in when things go awry along the way and advocate on their behalf with VA. But veterans shouldn't have to reach out to yet another office just to navigate these processes, which are all too complicated. So by improving transparency and accessibility for those filing a disability claim, as well as communication between veterans, their accredited representatives, and contractors, we can make sure that veterans receive the support that they have earned. And as we see more veterans file claims as a result of the PACT Act, it's so crucial that we have steps in place that are going to improve these processes as soon as possible. So I urge all of my colleagues to support this common sense legislation, which will help reduce the VA claims backlog and minimize delays that too many of our veterans are facing today. Thank you, and I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers. I wanted to say I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 1530 as amended, the Veterans Benefit Improvement Act, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Does the gentleman wish to yield back or reserve? From California.
He yielded back. Mm-hmm.
Do you wish to yield back or reserve?
I yield.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I would like to take and recognize the gentleman from Texas, Representative Self, for 2 minutes, please.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the Veterans Benefits Improvement Act. This bill will streamline the veterans' claims process through several actions, including adding language from my bill, H.R. 1329, to add 2 additional judges to the United States Court of Appeals for veterans' claims. For decades, the Board of Veterans' Appeals has been maligned because they cannot provide timely decisions to veterans who appeal their cases. To make matters worse, the court anticipates the caseload in FY 2023 increasing even more due to the amount of cases generated from the PACT Act. Quite simply, more cases before the board will lead to more denials, and more denials will lead to more appeals. The rapid growth of appeals will create an even larger backlog and leave veterans waiting longer periods of time, potentially years, for their cases to be resolved. Since the court's expansion from 5 to 7 permanent judges in 2011, appeals that have been filed to the court have more than doubled, from just under 4,000 to just under 9,000 in 2020. Increasing the number of judges will provide the court with an opportunity to prevent a backlog and provide veterans with decisions in a timely manner. The addition of this language to the bill is endorsed by the court itself. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 1530, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. At this time, Madam Speaker, I would like to recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Representative Siscomonte, for 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Boston. Thank you for yielding me this time to speak in support of Representative Luttrell's bill, the Veterans Benefit Improvement Act of 2023. I'm grateful that my bill, the Veterans Appeals Backlog Improvement Act, is included in this package. My bipartisan bill, which I introduced with Congressman McGarvey, is aimed at reducing wait times for our veterans with claims in front of the Board of Veteran Appeals. For too many of our veterans, they're waiting weeks, months, and sometimes even years to hear back. These delays create an incredible hurdle for our veterans who are trying to get a potentially life-changing decision. While progress has been made in this area to older legacy VA appeals from veterans, The backlog is only increasing with newer claims stemming from the PACT Act. Simply put, the Board of Veterans' Appeals, like all employers, is having issues recruiting employees and does not have enough staff to process the volume of the cases. To address this shortage, my bill would create an internship program for law students at the Board of Veterans' Appeals. Additionally, it would create a 9-year pilot honors program at the VA for recruiting entry-level attorneys to work at the Board of Veterans' Appeals. This bill makes major strides in improving and addressing the backlog and delays that our veterans see for too often and will help recruit much-needed staff. I look forward to supporting this legislation in swift passage on the House floor, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding back. Speaker, once again, I want to encourage all members to support this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1530 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Speaker, I object on the vote on the ground that the quorum is not present and make the point of order that the quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. So for what purpose, I'm sorry, pursuant to Clause, no, for what purpose? Gentleman from Illinois seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass S112.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 112, an act to amend Title 38 United States Code to strengthen benefits for children of Vietnam veterans born with spina bifida and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Boss, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on S112.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of Senator Braun's of Indiana's Bill S112, which strengthens the spina bifida program at VA. Children who are born to veterans exposed to Agent Orange and other herbicides have a higher risk of being born with this condition. Their condition can range from mild to severe, but children faced with this lifelong impact of spinal bifida have many special needs. Under current law, VA Spinal Bifida Health Care Benefit Program provides monetary and health care benefits to the select children of Vietnam-era veterans and veterans of covered services in Korea or Thailand. Senator Braun's common sense legislation would improve the current program by establishing care and coordination teams for these children to ensure they have the care and support and continued connection that they need for their entire lives. Additionally, this bill would require VA to create an advisory council on health care and benefits for children living with spinal bifida. This council would solicit feedback on health care, job training, and monetary benefits to ensure that these children have access to leading therapies and medical research. For a lot of veterans' families, I know this legislation would make a real difference in their daily lives. Now, I also want to thank Representative Baird for his work on this issue and introduce the House companion to this bill, H.R. 3888. I know that these members have heard from Hoosiers about this problem for many years, and I appreciate their efforts to help their constituents and other families. Now, I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting S112 today. And with that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California. Illinois reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I rise to express my support for S112, a bipartisan bill sponsored by Senator Braun of Indiana. This legislation aims to strengthen the Department of Veterans Affairs administration of an existing program that provides health care benefits and compensation to children of Vietnam War veterans who were born with spina bifida. This bill is endorsed by Vietnam Veterans of America. Spina bifida is a birth defect that can cause paralysis, nerve damage, and bowel and bladder problems. Children born with spina bifida may receive benefits from VA if one of their biological parents is a veteran presumed to have been exposed to herbicides such as Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. The program is jointly administered by the Veterans Benefits Administration, VBA, and the Veterans Health Administration, or VHA. It provides a monetary allowance, health care coverage, and vocational training and rehabilitation. As of 2022, fewer than 1,000 beneficiaries were enrolled in the program. According to a 2021 VA Office of Inspector General report examining VA's administration of this program, VBA and VHA were not adequately communicating or sharing data on spina bifida program beneficiaries. This contributed to delays in some new beneficiaries being enrolled in health care and improper payments being sent to some beneficiaries after their deaths. The Inspector General also found that VA did not consistently conduct outreach to eligible and enrolled beneficiaries and did not provide effective case management services for the most seriously disabled beneficiaries. In some cases, VA's call center agents provided inaccurate information about the spina bifida program or could not direct callers to reliable sources of information. S-112 directs VA to establish an advisory council for the spina bifida program, which would be responsible for soliciting feedback from covered children and veterans about programs' effectiveness. This legislation also requires VA to establish care coordination teams, which will contact beneficiaries at least once every 180 days to ensure they are accessing needed care. Finally, S-112 would require VA to report to Congress every 2 years on the number of covered children receiving benefits, the number of covered children receiving care coordination, and the outcome of the outreach conducted to these populations. Madam Speaker, once again, I support this important piece of legislation. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Madam Speaker, I have no speakers, and I will reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers. I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing S-112 to strengthen VA's benefits for children of Vietnam veterans born with spina bifida, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Madam Speaker, I once again encourage all members to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 112? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3.
Madam Speaker, I object.
In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Madam Speaker, I object on the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present, and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass S-475.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 475, an act to designate the clinic of the Department of Veterans Affairs in Gallup, New Mexico as the Hiroshi Hershey Miyamura VA Clinic.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Boss, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on S-475.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of a bill designating the Department of Veterans Affairs Clinic in Gallup, New Mexico as the Hiroshi Miyamura VA Clinic. The Hiroshi Miyamura was born in Gallup, New Mexico, the son of a Japanese immigrant. He received the nickname Hershey from his 4th grade teacher, who could not pronounce his first name correctly. I know how that happens. He joined the U.S. Army during the final day of World War II, served as a machine gunner in the storied 442nd Infantry Regiment. Following the war, he remained as in the Army Reserve. On the onset of the Korean War, Hershey was recalled to active duty and once again sent to the front lines. He earned the Medal of Honor for his actions during a firefight that occurred overnight from April 24th to April 25th, 1951. Overwhelmed by the enemy forces, Corporal Mahamura covered the safe withdrawal of his entire company, despite being wounded himself. Unfortunately, he was captured immediately after his heroic actions. He was held as a prisoner of war for 28 months and released on August 20th, 1953, a month after the end of the Korean War. In October of that year, President Eisenhower presented the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Mahamura. After his honorable discharge, he returned to his community in Gallup, New Mexico, where he became an automobile mechanic and service station owner. More importantly, he remained actively supporting his fellow veterans and inspiring young people with his patriotism and continued service. Hiroshi Mahamura is an inspiring American hero. He was born to immigrants, rose to call of a nation, put himself before others in combat, and served as a valuable member of society afterwards. This bill ensures his sacrifice and legacy will always be remembered. And I want to thank the sponsor of this bill, Senator Hendrich, as well as the entire New Mexico delegation for recognizing this American hero. I urge all my colleagues to support 475. And with that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise to express my support for S-475, a bill to designate the clinic of the Department of Veterans Affairs in Gallup, New Mexico as the Hiroshi Hershey Miyamura VA Clinic. This bill honors a great American from the greatest generation. I thank Senator Heinrich for sponsoring this bill and Representative Leger Fernandez for offering the House companion. Born in Gallup, New Mexico, the son of immigrants, Mr. Miyamura joined the Army in 1944. He was assigned to the now storied 442nd Regimental Combat Team, although he arrived too late in Europe to see much action. However, his military service did not end with World War II. He enlisted in the Army Reserves after the war and was called into active duty with the outbreak of the Korean War. He became a squad leader in the 3rd Infantry Division. On the night of April 24, 1951, Corporal Miyamura's unit of machine gunners and riflemen came under attack. He killed 10 enemy soldiers with his bayonet. He then blasted his way with his machine gun, a rifle, and grenades, and wielded his bayonet again to allow his men to retreat. He killed more than 50 of the enemy before his ammunition was depleted, and he was severely wounded. He was captured and held for 28 months as a prisoner of war until he was released in 1953 after the armistice. For his conduct, then Corporal Miyamura was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity. He was awarded in secret in 1951 while he was a POW, but it was finally presented in public in 1953. Achieving the rank of Staff Sergeant, Mr. Miyamura returned to New Mexico. His dedication and patriotism continued as he returned to South Korea to share his experiences in the war. He also served as an integral part of the lives of veterans and others in his community. Mr. Miyamura once said, "Until I saw that flag, the Star-Spangled Banner waving in the breeze, did I know. I've learned what it represents." That alone is what makes you feel so humble. Excuse me, Madam Speaker. So many of these fellows who deserve it never came home to any recognition. There are so many Americans who don't know what the medal represents or what any soldier or servicewoman or man does for this country. And I believe one of these days, I hope one of these days, they will learn of the sacrifices that a lot of men and women have made for this country. Madam Speaker, let this legislation be an opportunity to let our fellow Americans know about the service and sacrifice that came before. Madam Speaker, I support this important piece of legislation, and I ask my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
I have no speakers, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the speaker from California.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my very good friend who serves on the House Rules Committee and House Committee on Natural Resources, the gentlewoman from the extraordinarily beautiful state of Mexico, Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Takano, and thank you very much, Madam Speaker and the Chair, for allowing me to speak today in support of Senate 475, which Senator Heinrich and I introduced. It would designate the Veterans Affairs Clinic in Gallup, New Mexico as a Hershey Miyamura VA clinic, the Hiroshi Hershey Miyamura VA clinic. Corporal Hiroshi, or Hershey, as those in New Mexico called him early on, was born in 1925 to Japanese immigrants in Gallup, New Mexico. Beautiful Gallup, New Mexico is in my district and is surrounded by beautiful mountains, mesas, the Navajo Nation, the Zuni Pueblos, and others. It is a tremendously, achingly beautiful place. But from Gallup, he answered the call to serve not just once, but twice in his life, first in World War II and then in the Korean War. He wanted to fight for his country in World War II, but was ineligible because of his ancestry until 1945. He then served in the 442nd Infantry Regiment, a unit entirely composed of Japanese Americans, because we must remember that at the time that he was answering the call to service, we were suffering in the United States a period of hatred and xenophobia towards Japanese Americans, which makes his answer to the call of service even more extraordinary, and for which we are even more grateful. In 1959, Corporal Miyamura held off enemy soldiers that threatened his machine gun squad. He faced them in hand-to-hand combat. He single-handedly held the line, giving his squad time to reach safely. Corporal Miyamura would spend the next 28 months as a prisoner of war. Corporal Miyamura was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his service, only learning of his achievement upon his release in 1953. And thank you for sharing those most moving words that he spoke upon receiving that medal. He was the second to the last living Korean War Medal of Honor recipient. Now, his passing in November 2022 reminds us of the sacrifices our veterans make to defend our beautiful nation. The Gallup community is extremely proud to have been Corporal Miyamura's home where he returned. The Veterans Affairs Clinic in Gallup provides essential care to veterans and their dependents. It is one of our rural CBOCs that provides essential care so that our veterans don't have to spend 2 to 3 hours on the road to get the care that we have promised our veterans. I have visited that clinic. I have visited with the veterans in Gallup, and they have asked me about the status of this designation. So I'm going to be really happy when we pass this, hopefully this week, to tell them we have done it.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
I yield an additional 30 seconds.
We will name this clinic after him so that he can keep watch over his brothers and sisters in arms as their guardian angel. We will remember, Gallup will miss him, a nation will miss him, but most of all, we will continue to honor him. I hope my colleagues will join me in honoring Corporal Miyamura and vote for Senate Bill 475. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers. I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing S 475, a bill to designate the clinic of the Department of Veterans Affairs in Gallup, New Mexico as the Hiroshi Hershey Miyamura VA Clinic. And let me just add that I had 3 great uncles who served in the 442nd, a storied regimental combat team, always a poignant story about their service. And I want to thank the chairman for offering his support in the commemoration of their service to our country. At this time, I will yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to once again, I want to encourage members to support this legislation. This is truly a piece of legislation that the community knows and understands how a gallant hero that serves this nation. Congressional Medal of Honor is the highest award. It's not given lightly. And for a person who truly did face a time when persecution happened to his people but still served this nation, it is a true honor that we need to bestow on him. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 475? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3371.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 160, H.R. 3371, a bill to direct the Secretary of the Interior to complete all actions necessary for certain land to be held in restricted fee status by the Oglala Sioux Tribe and Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, a gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, and a gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gallego, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 3371, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, H.R. 3371, the Wounded Knee Memorial and Sacred Site Act, introduced by Congressman Johnson from South Dakota, would place approximately 40 acres of fee land within the Pine Ridge Reservation into restricted fee status for the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. The land would be held as a memorial and a sacred site in remembrance of the Indian people killed in the Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890. In the mid and late 1800s, there were many armed conflicts between tribes, settlers, and the U.S. military on the Great Plains and in the western United States. This contributed to distrust, fear, and misconceptions between groups, and the Wounded Knee Massacre was a result of that atmosphere. On December 29, 1890, a group of Lakota Indians led by Chief Spotted Elk had made camp near Wounded Knee Creek on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. U.S. Army 7th Cavalry Troop were sent there to disarm the Lakota. A struggle occurred between the U.S. Army and some of Chief Spotted Elk's band, a majority of which consisted of women and children. A shot rang out and the U.S. Army opened fire on the largely unarmed group. At that time, it was estimated that approximately 300 Indian people were killed. In September of 2022, the Oglala Sioux tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe jointly purchased 40 acres of land where an old trading post was located. The piece of land also contains a portion of the area where the Wounded Knee Massacre took place. On October 21st, 2022, both tribes signed a covenant stating that this property shall be held and maintained as a memorial and a sacred site without any economic development, and prohibited any gaming on the land. I applaud Mr. Johnson for working collaboratively with both tribes to develop H.R. 3371, which would place the 40 acres into restricted fee status held jointly by both tribes and memorializes the covenant between them. Restricted fee land contains the same restrictions against alienation and taxation as land held in trust, but title is not held by the federal government. It is held by the Oglala Sioux and the Cheyenne River Sioux tribes. This legislation and the land it sets aside will memorialize and honor the Indian men, women, and children that were killed in 1890. Thank you to the gentleman from South Dakota, Mr. Johnson, and the Oglala Sioux and the Cheyenne River Sioux tribes for their work on this important legislation. And I urge my colleagues to support this bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 3371, the Wounded Knee Massacre Memorial and Sacred Site Act, introduced by my colleague from South Dakota, Representative Johnson. This legislation is an important step to honor Lakota lives lost at Wounded Knee and honor the Lakota for generations to come. In particular, this bill would place approximately 40 acres of land located within the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation into restricted fee status for the Oglala Sioux tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. This is the land believed to be the site of the 1890 Wounded Knee Massacre. In the late 1880s, tribes began holding ghost dances for the renewal of stolen land and in protest of the U.S. government, a government that prohibited American Indians from practicing their religious freedom. In December of 1890, the government sent U.S. Army 7th Cavalry troops to disarm Lakota near Wounded Knee Creek. A struggle occurred, and the 7th Cavalry brutally massacred over 350 American Indian men, women, and children near Wounded Creek. The Wounded Knee Massacre was one of the most atrocious acts in our nation's history. The healing is still continuing today. In 2022, the Oglala Sioux tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe purchased this land and signed a covenant to hold and maintain the land as a memorial and sacred site. Representative Johnson's bill affirms that covenant and would allow the Oglala Sioux tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe to hold, maintain, and protect the land as a memorial and sacred site without any development. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arizona reserves. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from South Dakota, the lead sponsor of this bill, Mr. Johnson.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In December 1890, Chief Spotted Elk and his band of Lakota, including many women and children, were moving from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, the reservation, to the Pine Ridge Sioux reservation. As was mentioned, they were stopped by the Army's 7th Cavalry, and they were forced to make camp at Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota. The next morning, on December 29th, the 7th Cavalry attempted to disarm the Lakota. A struggle ensued, a shot ran out, and before long, the 7th Cavalry was opening fire on the Lakota. Almost all of them unarmed, and as was mentioned earlier, most women and children. More than 300 non-combatants were killed. Mr. Speaker, this was a massacre. Too many think of Wounded Knee as something that happened in the long ago past and in a faraway place.
The inaccuracy of that view was driven home to me in June when I went to the site and I spoke to the descendants of Wounded Knee. There I sat at length with an elder whose grandmother survived that day. He grew up hearing from her own voice of the fear, of the violence, of the tragedy of that day. Mr. Speaker, this was not a history book. This was his grandmother. Close by at St. John's Church, I looked at the site where the wounded and the dying were taken. The floorboards of that church are still stained with their blood. These are real people. These are real places. These are not ancient tales of a distant land. Our nation has struggled with how best to remember, to mourn that terrible day. On the 100th anniversary of Wounded Knee, this body issued a formal apology and expressed deep regret for the actions of that day, and that is obviously altogether appropriate, although on its own it is woefully insufficient. Last year, the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe exercised tremendous leadership by coming together to purchase the 40 acres surrounding this site, an area that was mentioned was site to just an old trading post. The management of that site was not an appropriate memory of those who had died that day. And so this bill, the Wounded Knee Massacre Memorial and Sacred Site Act, would place those 40 acres into restricted fee status, in essence, placing them into trust for the tribes. That would provide the tribes additional tools that they could use to better protect this sacred land. I want to recognize the leadership of the tribal leaders involved. Firstly, President Frank Starr comes out, who graces our body with his presence in this chamber today. But also Chairman Ryman LeBeau, former President Kevin Killer, former Chairman Harold Frazier. We have spent months working together along with committee staff and along with the Department of Interior to craft this important legislation. My colleagues, I ask for a yes vote on this bill. Wounded Knee is sacred ground. It has been hallowed by the blood of innocent women and children. It deserves protection. This act can give the tribes, the descendants of those who died, the tools they need to do just that, and I would yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time, and I'm prepared to close, and I continue to reserve.
Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support the legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this legislation will further allow the Lakota people to memorialize and honor their relatives and ancestors killed in the Wounded Knee Massacre. It gives title of the land to both of the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, while ensuring that the land has the protections that restrictions against alienation and taxation provide. I urge the adoption of this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 3371? I'm sorry. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the...
Mr. Speaker.
George is recognized.
I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on the motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2872 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 161, H.R. 2872, a bill to amend the Permanent Electronic Duck Stamp Act of 2013 to allow states to issue electronic stamps under such act and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, and the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gallego, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material in H.R. 2872 as amended, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2872, sponsored by my friend and colleague, Congressman Graves of Louisiana. This bill makes common sense improvements to the federal duck stamp program by modernizing how waterfowl hunters across the country can purchase a federal duck stamp. The duck stamp was created when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Migratory Bird Hunting Stamp Act into law in 1934. That law required waterfowl and other migratory bird hunters ages 16 and over to purchase and possess a valid duck stamp prior to taking of migratory waterfowl. Current law requires hunters to physically possess a signed duck stamp on their person while hunting any migratory waterfowl. And even in states where electronic licensing is used, a signed physical duck stamp is required. H.R. 2872 further modernizes the program by removing the 45-day requirement to have a physical duck stamp, and it allows states the option to sell electronic duck stamps for the entirety of the hunting season. Under this bill, purchasers would still receive the physical stamp at the end of their state waterfowl hunting season, therefore preserving the long legacy of the federal duck stamp as a physical representation of the conservation efforts of hunters for generations to come. This is a good governance approach that will reassure waterfowl hunters and continue to the unmatched American tradition of wildlife conservation through sportsman participation. I applaud Mr. Graves for his work on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Georgia reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The duck stamp, or Federal Migratory Bird Hunting and Conservation Stamp, is the only federal conservation revenue stamp. This means 98% of the sale price is used to purchase conservation easements and to acquire wetland habitats for the National Wildlife Refuge System. The duck stamp also provides an opportunity to showcase wildlife art, with the Fish and Wildlife Service hosting an art competition each year and a winning piece selected for next year's design. Sportsmen and women, artists and conservationists purchase duck stamps as a collectible to cover entry fees to any wildlife refuge system unit, as a hunting license, or as a donation to conservation. Millions of stamps have been sold in recent years, contributing to tens of millions of dollars toward conservation each year. This bipartisan bill will modernize government stamp services by allowing online access to federal duck stamp. This improvement will save applicants and agency officials time and money and make it more accessible for hunters, conservationists, and collectors to purchase duck stamps and support wetland conservation. It's a good bill, and I'm happy to support it. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Louisiana, the lead sponsor of this bill, Mr. Graves.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my friend from Georgia for yielding the time. Mr. Speaker, this legislation is related, as you heard, to the duck stamp. In 1932, President Roosevelt signed into law legislation that authorized the duck stamp, that allowed for hunters to get this stamp in order to go hunt waterfowl. This program has been incredibly successful over that 90-year program, over the 90-year period, selling today approximately 1.6 million stamps every single year. This has generated approximately $1.1 billion that has all of these proceeds invested back into conservation. into the Migratory Bird Conservation Fund. This has benefited over 600,000 acres of our National Wildlife Refuge system and benefited conservation. I'll say it again, this program's been wildly successful. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, legislation was signed into law that created an electronic duck stamp. And the thought there was with the internet, with the ability to improve access to compliance, we would allow for a digital duck stamp to provide 45 days of authorization to go hunt. 45 days. The problem is that the physical paper stamp often missed that 45-day window. So the problem would be someone paid to get a duck stamp, they had a 45-day authorization window, the physical stamp didn't come in after the end of that period, and so the hunter would be out of compliance, yet they did everything right. This bill is very simple. It just allows for the digital authorization, the electronic authorization, to be extended throughout the season. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, it still preserves the fiscal stamp that so many people treasure and collect annually. And so it does require the stamp be physically mailed later on. I want to give a huge shout out to the co-sponsor on this legislation, Congressman Mike Thompson, a fellow sportsman from California. I want to thank Senator Bozeman and Senator Manchin, who have co-sponsored the Senate Companion Bill. And I want to thank Bruce Westerman, the chair of the committee, and Ranking Member Grijalva for working with us to clear this legislation. It's really important that this move forward. Mr. Speaker, before I close, I want to let you know about how this came about. I love it whenever you're out there in the field or meeting with constituents back home and people bring up ideas. In this case, there was actually a sportsman in our office, Taylor Playforth. We call him Baylor because he sunk his boat, but that's a whole nother story. But Taylor Playforth, who's an avid sportsman, actually came up with this idea, and we were able to get this turned into legislative text, work with senators to introduce it, work with the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus and others, and ultimately yielding this legislation that I'm hopeful that my friend from Arizona is going to ensure that we pass unanimously today. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all the folks that worked on this. I want to thank Vivian, staff from the Natural Resources Committee, and Sandra as well, and urge adoption of this legislation and yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time and am prepared to close, and I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Speaker, we also have I have no further requests for time, and we are prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
I apologize. Nope. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the North American model of wildlife conservation, which is based on a user-pays system through the purchase of items like the federal duck stamp, is the envy of the world. In total, fees paid by sportsmen's communities contribute over $1 billion per year in revenue that goes toward wildlife conservation, which is a truly remarkable achievement. H.R. 2872 is a common-sense, bipartisan bill that underpins the North American model by giving hunters certainty while modernizing the federal duck stamp process. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2872 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair,
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The purpose of the gentleman seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 663 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 663, a bill to amend the Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Act.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, and the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gallego, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 663 as amended, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 663, the Native American Child Protection Act, introduced by Congressman Gallego from Arizona, would amend the Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Act to reauthorize 3 programs administered by the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Interior. These programs include the Indian Child Abuse Treatment Grant Program, the Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Program, and the Indian Child Resource and Family Service Centers, which would be renamed the National Indian Child Resource and Family Service Center under this legislation. These programs are intended to prevent cases within Indian communities where child abuse, neglect, family violence, and trauma may occur, and to provide treatment for victims of Indian child sexual abuse. H.R. 663 also makes several technical changes to the underlying statute and requires agency reports on grant awards and performance. The Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Act was introduced in 1989 by the late Arizona Senator John McCain in response to widespread reports that Native children were being physically and sexually abused, that these incidences were going underreported, and that there needed to be supports in place to ensure the Bureau of Indian Affairs could handle the situation at the time. The Act created the programs H.R. 663 would reauthorize, and it included provisions to provide tribes with technical assistance training and other resources related to the investigation and treatment of the cases of family violence, abuse, and neglect. The authorization for these programs expired in 1997. H.R. 663 would reauthorize these programs and make improvements to the program's operations and service delivery. Advocates cite the Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Act as the only federal statute that sets aside funding for tribal governments dedicated to child abuse prevention and victim treatment funding for tribal governments. I appreciate the gentleman from Arizona for bringing attention to this important issue, as abuse, neglect, and violence have no place in any community, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 663, the Native American Child Protection Act. American Indian and Alaska Native children have the highest rate of child abuse in the United States, at a rate of 15 cases for every 1,000 children. This can have devastating impacts on a child's cognitive, emotional, and neurological development, and can last them well into adulthood and even their entire life. On top of this crisis, the Supreme Court recently heard a case attempting to gut the Indian Child Welfare Act, which protects the rights of Native children and families. That's why passing the Native American Child Protection Act today is so timely. My bipartisan bill reauthorizes and revises programs that give tribes the tools to treat, prevent, investigate, and prosecute child abuse and family violence involving Native American children. The programs in this bill were originally led by another Arizonan back in 1990 through John McCain's Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Act. That bill was part of a promise to answer for the tragic abuse that happened at federally run Native American boarding schools. But the programs have never been fully funded, were never authorized, and eventually expired. This is a failure by the federal government and the continuation of centuries of broken promises. By passing H.R. 663, we will take a step to right this wrong. We will create a National Indian Child Resource and Family Services Center to help tribes and urban Indian organizations with training and program development. We will develop new intergovernmental agreements between tribes and states to prevent, investigate, treat, and prosecute family violence. And we will encourage culturally appropriate treatments and services for children that have been impacted. In a place where we see a lot of partisan bickering, it is heartening to see so much bipartisan support around tribal issues, including my Republican counterpart and co-lead on this bill, Representative Newhouse. I also want to thank Natural Resources Committee Chairman Westerman and Ranking Member Raul Grijalva, as well as Indian and Insular Affairs Subcommittee Chairman Hagman and Ranking Member Ledger Fernandez for their support. The Native American Child Protection Act is another chance for us to work together and fulfill our promise to help this vulnerable population. I urge my colleagues to support final passage of H.R. 663, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time and am prepared to close, and I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this legislation does the critical work of Congress to update and reauthorize programs. This work is especially important when the programs in question help protect children and support tribes in caring for their tribal members. I urge the adoption of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 663 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Georgia seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. The Chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed S-2795, an act to amend Title 38 United States Code to extend and modify certain authorities and requirements relating to the Department of Veterans Affairs and for other purposes, in which concurrence of the House is requested.
Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Motions to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3981, Senate 475, and H.R. 663. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business of the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3981 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
Union Calendar Number 153, H.R. 3981, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to improve the methods by which the Secretary of Veterans Affairs conducts oversight of certain educational institutions and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 410, the nays are 0, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Boss, to suspend the rules and pass Senate 475, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
Senate 475, an act to designate the clinic of the Department of Veterans Affairs in Gallup, New Mexico as the Hiroshi Hershey Mayamura VA Clinic.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 409, the nays are 0, 2/3 being in the affirmative. One voted as present, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business, in this vote on the motion to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 663 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 663, a bill to amend the Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Act.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. Two minutes remain. Does any member wish to change their vote? On this vote, the yeas are 378, the nays are 32. 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The House will be in order. I entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. The House will be in order. Please continue your conversations off the floor, please. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, September is Suicide Prevention Month, and nearly every 12 minutes an American dies by suicide. It is now the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. Suicide claims the lives of more than 2,000 Pennsylvanians each year, an average of 5 lives each day. But, Mr. Speaker, suicide is preventable. Increasing access to crisis resources saves lives. Mental and behavioral health research saves lives. Ending the stigma surrounding suicide saves lives. There is no single cause of suicide, and suicide risk increases when several health factors and life stressors converge to create an experience of hopelessness and despair. But together we can reverse this course. By making mental health care, substance abuse treatment, and suicide prevention a national priority, we can reverse the tide on those deaths of despair. In fact, in 2020, the United States designated 988 as a national suicide and crisis hotline, making it easier for all Americans to reach help if needed. Mr. Speaker, let's keep the conversation going year-round. We can all play an important role in prevention. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to discuss how the extreme MAGA Republicans are plotting a government shutdown and forcing a partisan impeachment inquiry, while my Democratic colleagues and I are putting people over politics to help working Americans. The extreme MAGA Republicans are doing nothing to make life better for average Americans. They're pushing an unpopular agenda of cuts to health care, child care, education, and public safety. They want to allow dangerous people to own guns, and they want to limit voting so only their supporters can vote. And they want to take away rights for women and minorities that are protected in the Constitution. Even Senate and moderate Republicans oppose their plans. The extreme Republicans make our country weaker and hurt American families. They need to serve the American people and stop this reckless pursuit of a radical agenda. And with that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 1993, the United States Air Force deployed Task Force Ranger to Somalia to restore order to the capital city of Mogadishu. After it was taken over by a rebel warlord, the Battle of Mogadishu was the event which inspired the movie Black Hawk Down. The Somali people wanted democracy, but this general and his militia took over the nation to impose radical Islamic Sharia law. They hijacked food supplies and cut off water to anyone who did not support their reign of terror. After several successful operations, Task Force Rangers set out on a mission to arrest 2 of the general's top lieutenants in a building by the Olympic Hotel in militia stronghold neighborhood. The plan was to surround the building the lieutenants were meeting in, lower themselves from ropes from helicopters and surround them, then take the prisoners to the vehicles that would be waiting outside. Unfortunately, the mission took a catastrophic turn, Mr. Speaker, when 2 Black Hawk helicopters were shot down by rocket-propelled grenades. The soldiers were attacked, and the battle that followed lasted 18 hours. 18 of our brave men were killed and dozens were injured, and the Somalis lost over 1,000 men. This October, Knoxville is holding the 30th anniversary event to commemorate this mission, while surviving members of Task Force Ranger can be reunited and they can remember their fallen brothers. As a Christian, Mr. Speaker, I owe everything I have in my life, except for my salvation, to the men and women that wore our country's uniform. The member of Task Force Ranger are no different, and I'm looking forward to seeing them in Knoxville this year and welcome the heroes and give them some true Tennessee hospitality, Mr. Speaker. I yield the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the remarkable life and legacy of North Carolina's Dr. John Gilbert, who recently passed. From Dr. Gilbert's time serving in the U.S. Army to his tenure on the Wake County School Board, he devoted his life to serving others. John Gilbert was a towering figure in Wake County, best known for his unwavering dedication to the Wake County public school system. At a time of enormous change, Dr. Gilbert spearheaded innovative efforts to combat segregation and bring additional resources to underserved schools. After 16 years of service on the school board, John served on the Wake County Board of Elections, where he worked to uphold fair elections and secure voting rights for all. Today, John Gilbert's enduring legacy lives through the many people and students whose lives he transformed. Our community is forever indebted to John Gilbert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Robert Minichiello, a Blauvelt resident and American hero who recently turned 100 years old. Born a few years after the end of World War I, he has lived through some of our country's most transformative moments and some of its greatest tests. Robert served our country honorably during World War II, where he fought in Europe as part of the 26th Infantry Division and was wounded in the Moselle region of France in November of 1944. Robert received the Purple Heart in recognition of his efforts and the injuries he sustained. The heroes of our greatest generation should never be forgotten, and I'm proud to count Robert Minichiello, a hero of our greatest generation, as one of my constituents. So please join me in wishing Robert Minichiello of Blauvelt a happy 100th birthday.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to celebrate a man whose music has not only entertained us for decades, but has made a profound impact on society. Jimmy Buffett, the legendary singer-songwriter, isn't just an artist who's given us catchy tunes and a taste of the beach life. He's a cultural icon whose contributions have touched the hearts and souls of people around the world. Jimmy Buffett's music reminds us that our worth is not only tied to how much money we make or how much output we can produce in our consumer-driven society, but that relaxing and enjoying the fruits of life with the people you love is okay. Through his lyrics and melodies, he transports us to the sun-soaked shores of Florida and the carefree attitude that reminds us to embrace the things that truly matter and make life beautiful. His influence went beyond music. He was a philanthropist who was dedicated to ending the climate crisis, to environmental causes, and has inspired countless people to join the fight against climate change across the entire nation. Thank you, Jimmy Buffett, for making our world a little more beautiful, a little more joyful, and a little more caring. Your legacy will continue to inspire generations to come. Cheers to you and to the paradise you've created for us all. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Bill Shipp and recognize his decades of political journalism and service to Georgians. A newsman from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and his own independent publication, Bill Shipp was like the Google of Georgia politics, infinitely knowledgeable about all happenings within the state at a time well before the internet even existed. Throughout his storied career, Shipp used his knowledge to cover everything from the civil rights movement to the space age and the Republican Revolution. His ability to keep Georgians informed and to hold politicians accountable started at the young age of 20, when he served as the managing editor of UGA's Red and Black newspaper. It was in that position as editor that Shipp advocated fearlessly for the integration of UGA's law school, wielding his voice to do good. The loss of Mr. Shipp marks the end of an era, and I will miss his sharp quips, witty remarks, and comprehensive coverage throughout Georgia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
You ask unanimous consent, ma'am?
I do. And to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you so much. This Hispanic Heritage Month, I want to lift up the legacy of Santos Rodriguez, a child murdered by police in my home of Dallas, Texas, 50 years ago this year. At only 12 years old, Santos was shot and killed by police in front of his brother in Dallas's Little Mexico district. He was unarmed. Earlier this summer, I hosted a commemoration of Santos in Dallas, celebrating the tireless advocacy of his family in securing justice and change after his senseless murder. In the years since his death, the Rodriguez family and the Latino community of North Texas have built a movement of resilience and strength in his honor. But Santos did not come into this world to become a martyr. He simply wanted to live and grow like any other child. Today, I ask that we honor the life and the family of Santos Rodriguez, not just with words, but with actions. No child should have to lose their life for the world to recognize that their life had meaning. We can and should do better for all, but especially for our kiddos. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the numbers don't lie, and the data shows a staggering, unmitigated disaster continues at our southern border. 5.8 million illegal crossings since Biden took office, 1.6 million gotaways, nearly 24,000 pounds of fentanyl, and 146 crossers on the terror watch list. Mr. Speaker, Biden's open border policy is a cancer on our country, and it's making our nation very sick. One statistic that stands out to me, in the wake of the manhunt for the escaped fugitive in Pennsylvania, a murderer who came here illegally and terrorized Pennsylvania communities for 2 weeks, is the number of criminal non-citizen arrests, Mr. Speaker. Over 10,000 illegal aliens have been arrested this year who had serious convictions on their record. That's compared to 2,400 in 2020 during Trump's last year in office. And these weren't petty convictions. These were for murder, rape, assault, DUI, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, and more. Mr. Speaker, this administration is turning a blind eye to our immigration laws. If the White House won't stop it, this House needs to. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Address the body for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman asks unanimous consent.
I do.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as a proud member of the Congressional Labor Caucus, I rise today to stand in solidarity with the 150,000 United Auto Workers who deserve a fair shake. Something is wrong when corporate bigwigs increase their salaries by 40%, but auto workers get only a 6% increase in the last 4 years. Something is wrong when the big three automakers enjoyed $250 billion in profits over the last 9 years, $66 billion of that going to shareholders, while auto workers can't even afford to buy the cars that they build. Auto workers play a huge role in this country's transition to clean energy, and they deserve to have a fair wage along with benefits and better working conditions. I stand with the auto workers in their fight to secure the contracts that they deserve, and with that I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the East Central High School baseball Hornets team for their outstanding showing in the 2023 Mississippi High School Athletic Association Class 5A tournament. After winning a state title last year, the Hornets were determined to repeat in the playoffs. The Hornets found themselves in elimination games multiple times, but these athletes were unified by fortitude, not anxiety. To paraphrase senior All-State catcher Logan Terry, they just didn't lose. This mentality brought the Hornets their first repeat championship in school history. Their success over the last 2 seasons is a testament to the leadership of Coach Bo Long and a large class of senior players. Congratulations to the East Central Hornets baseball team on their outstanding season. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on day 4 since the United Auto Workers contract expired to encourage all leaders of management and the union to find common ground to ensure workers receive their fair share of the success of the auto industry. For Indiana's 1st Congressional District, I represent the incredible UAW members from Region 2B in Indiana and also members that work at the Ford plant across the state line in Illinois out of Local 551. The steel and manufacturing industries of Northwest Indiana are also critical suppliers for the automobile manufacturers, and throughout our history, organized labor has been on the front lines fighting for fair pay, access to affordable health care, safe working conditions, and sound retirement benefits. That fight continues today on day 4, and I again encourage all parties at the table to recognize the inherent value of the UAW workers and their essential contributions to the success, not just in the auto industry, but for the economic success for our communities and the expansion of the middle class. I also would like to wish my mom a happy 89th birthday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House 1 minute and revise and extend my
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So during the month of August, we had several wildfires break out in my district up in Siskiyou County at the top of California. So as you know, our federal wildland firefighters are on the front lines battling the blazes and preventing them from spreading to populated areas and burning down all of our forests and the habitats that's in them. So they're doing their jobs, working 16-hour days often, grueling heat, remote, rugged terrain. And so what happens? The new food vendor for the Forest Service tried serving them beans and rice on bread on the far side there, and then moldy cheese sandwiches for our firefighters that we asked to be out there in risky conditions, in tough, hot conditions as well. What an insult. What a slap on the face, as they have a national food vendor trying to provide meals like that actually would cause harm to their health as well as just the sustenance they need to work hard. So in line of all this, we also find that the Klamath National Forest supervisor who fired this food service vendor was later investigated by the Forest Service higher-ups, and they only backed off because the scandal was made public. Now, since then, it has been corrected thanks to that Klamath Forest supervisor, and these unacceptable conditions are not going to continue. American people expect accountability for our firefighters, for our workers. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This weekend, I proudly joined United Auto Workers on the picket line at United Auto Workers Local 12 in Toledo, Ohio, striking Jeep Stellantis in solidarity. Our mother helped organize the United Auto Workers nearly 90 years ago at Champion Sparkplug, organizing and negotiating with United Auto Workers founders Victor and Walter Reuther. Our father, Stephen, who they called Cappy, retired in 1969 from Jeep. Both were able to get better wages and benefits to help our family as we were growing up. I wish to place in the record our mother's summary briefly why she joined a union and worked so hard, primarily to assure seniority rights of employment so you couldn't be fired because the supervisor brought family members to replace you. A bidding system was established so any open job was put up on the board so the one with the most seniority got the job if qualified. Discrimination was outlawed so the foreman could no longer put his pets or relatives on the best job. The right to ask for a pay raise was assured through negotiation and the right to strike granted to employees. Leaves for illness were granted so people wouldn't be fired if a doctor's certification was provided. I will continue tomorrow and enter the additional 3 sentences orally, but I just want to say, go UAW. We are so proud of you.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
I'd like to ask unanimous consent to speak for a minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 1 minute.
I'd like to call attention one more time to the members of this body. The lack of respect for the Second Amendment that took place in the state of New Mexico so recently. We all know where the increase in crime rate came from, probably 3 things. First of all, the breakdown of the family, which was encouraged by Lyndon Johnson's War on the Family. Secondly, liberal judges who are not putting people who are predisposed to put criminals in jail. And finally, liberal district attorneys who do not want to put members of the criminal class in jail. So as the result, we wind up with an increase in murders, an increase in crimes committed with guns. We have to rally and make it impossible, politically impossible, for anybody else to do what the New Mexico governor did a few weeks ago. The Second Amendment is designed to keep the power in this country with the people, and just because we have a family breakdown together with ultra-left-wing judges and district attorneys is no reason to give up on our Second Amendment. Rally, America! Rally around that Second Amendment. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday, before the climate summit at the UN, tens of thousands of people marched. I want to tell them, some of us in this building hear you, we see you, and we understand your demand for urgent action. We have seen in my state the wildfires in California. We've seen the flooding in New Hampshire and Vermont. We've seen the hottest summers recorded, and we have seen the smoke-filled air. We need this president to declare a climate emergency. We need to stop the export of our oil to other countries. We need to stop subsidizing fossil fuel companies. We need this president to keep his promise of no new drilling on public lands. That means no to the Willow Project. And we need to stand with the UAW workers who are building EVs to make sure they have a fair wage. Thank you to Gen Z for change. Thank you to Sunrise. Thank you to Climate Defiance. Thank you to all of the groups.
Gentleman's time has
marching.
expired. For what purposes the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? Gentlemen seek unanimous consent?
I do.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not voting for a continuing resolution. I'm not voting to continue the failure and the waste and the corruption and the election interference, and in some cases, the efforts that could lead this country into World War III. I oppose the CR authored by my friend and colleague from Florida, Byron Donalds. The Donald CR continues the Ukraine policy negotiated by Speaker Pelosi and Mitch McConnell in the omnibus that conservatives were against. The Donald CR is a permission slip for Jack Smith to continue his election interference as they are trying to gag the president, the former president of the United States, and the leading contender for the Republican nomination. And the Donald CR abandons the principle that it is only a review of single subject spending bills that will save this country and allow us to tweeze through these programs and force these agencies to stand up and defend their budget. My friends, we are approaching the days where we're facing $2 trillion annual deficits atop a $33 trillion debt. This is unsustainable. And just to continue things with some facial 8% cut over 30 days that will lead to no programmatic reform is an insult to the principles we fought for in January. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give a big shout out to some truly exceptional workers among many who are the heartbeat of our community. United States postal workers, firefighters, and TSA workers. Recently, I had the opportunity to meet with U.S. postal workers who ensure packages get delivered even in some of our most rural communities. And indeed, our U.S. postal workers deserve protection. I also visited with firefighters in Greenville and TSA agents at the Pitt Greenville Airport who are doing incredible work. And that is why we must ensure pay equity. I extend my deepest gratitude for the exceptional service and the work that's getting done each day for the American people. Let us never forget our essential workers who strengthen the nation. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Does the gentlewoman seek unanimous consent?
I do.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
The strength of America is in her workers. And today I rise on the floor of the House to stand with the UAW workers around the nation and those that are striking now in the Midwest. There are UAW workers in Texas, and I stand with them. Can we at least understand that the value of what these workers are advocating for are American values? Health benefits, the ability to have a permanent job, the ability to have compensation, to be able to buy and keep a house, or to provide for your family, or to buy a car that you make. This is a crisis that does not have to be. I ask and encourage the big three, the automakers, to sit with the UAW workers and resolve this the American way, and that is with fairness and justice and equality for all. UAW is fighting for American workers. American workers, over the decades and centuries, have helped build this nation. Let us not continue a strike that does not respond to the basic human needs of the UAW workers. Again, I stand with the workers. I look forward to a reasoned and responsible resolve of all of this. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. For anyone out there who's insane enough to have C-SPAN on, I may suggest requisitioning a life, but if you don't want someone to talk to you like an adult, if you don't want someone doing big math, big numbers, and being serious, I'm sure there's a video out there of a parakeet playing a piano someplace. Please leave now. You know, today I was actually going to try to come here and do the happy, positive talk. I actually had put together some boards of some really good things that had happened. And then we made the mistake of, on my flight, the staff was actually looking at the trust funds that were collapsing over the next few years. People forget, Medicare trust fund is gone within 7 years. And we can't actually work out the math of how devastating that will be, because about 40% of all Medicare spend comes through that trust fund, but it's almost all the money that Medicare patients receive at the hospital level. So let's first, I do have one happy slide, so we're going to do that one, and then we're going to go on to the reality. And let me sort of make a point. We're going to have the fight over, you know, the continuing resolution or the budget or these things, and people are going to do their political posturing, and we're going to fight and fight. Please understand, it's all important. It's rounding of the rounding errors of what's really going on. You're going to see some slides here where you got to understand every dime we vote on as members of Congress is now borrowed. Plus another $300 billion, and that's in this fiscal year. And it gets dramatically worse over the next few years. So if you actually, somewhere in your head, think, well, if we just got rid of waste and fraud and got rid of foreign aid, we'd be fine. Foreign aid is 12 days of borrowing. Why is it so hard for this place to grow up and understand the most basic parts of math? So, all right, I went off track there. I apologize. Let's go back. So how many of you saw this article? These are happy things. These are also things that are moral. They could make incredible differences. They could also save billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. I've been tracking the researchers on this, and I think it's University of Chicago. They had this crazy idea. Say, okay, we give people vaccines to train their body to attack things. How about if we gave a vaccine to train their body not to attack things? Okay, but if you think about multiple sclerosis as your body attacking your nerve systems, and one of my reasons I'm interested in it, we had a horrible, horrible family tragedy in regards to multiple sclerosis when I was very, very young. But the concept of sort of an inverse vaccine to take on autoimmune diseases, and it turns out type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. So I've been coming to this mic for years talking about the research on being able to replant islet cells back into the body, either through stem cells or the one that's been now FDA approved, which actually is islet cells that are bleached from cadavers and adjusted with CRISPR so your body doesn't need anti-rejection drugs, to now this concept of we're just going to teach your body not to attack. This is a big deal. There's some wonderful things happening. Now the really interesting question, will we be so broke as a country and a society that the ability to actually make the investment to do what's moral, that actually also lowers future borrowing? So look, today we finally crossed the 33 trillion. And some people are going to light their hair on fire. It's a big deal. It's about to get dramatically worse. this number we're going to look back on fondly the way we're going right now. Do understand, we now have, and we don't bet money, but we do have a little pool going with some of our staff and some of our economists of what will the fiscal borrowing be this year. Remember, the administration is trying to play some games where they're going to try to credit themselves back some of the student loan money that the Supreme Court said they can't spend. So we're actually looking at the real life borrowing number, not the fiscal deficit number, which has a journal entry fraud in it. And as of a couple hours ago, so far this fiscal year, and we still have a couple weeks left, I think we've borrowed $2,158 billion. Now, I don't want to win because I'm the idiot who said we're going to borrow $2,200 billion. Please understand. A year ago, Congressional Budget Office, 2002 May, said this year we'd borrow about $860 billion. Does something seem wrong in those numbers? 860 some billion over here. Now it looks like we're going to borrow 2.2 trillion. And almost every dime of that growth is healthcare costs exploded, particularly in Medicare. Tax receipts have fallen fairly dramatically. So much for this Biden socialized economy. I mean, we've handed out a couple $1 trillion of money to build factories, to subsidize this, to subsidize that. This was actually their modern monetary policy. Okay, you now have proof in the pudding. They set off inflation, and tax receipts have actually fallen. You know, I mean, if anyone wants to write an academic paper on monetary, modern monetary policy, you got the laboratory right in front of you. It collapsed. And what's the third thing that's actually gone against us this year? Interest. We've been tracking, bond market has not been treating us kindly. And we were playing with some math the other day, maybe another additional, on top of everything else, $160 billion of interest. Now, those are big numbers. Almost no one can process that sort of math. But let's actually walk through it in a way you can all understand. If you look at the last 12 months, we borrow over $72,000. We borrow, not spend, borrow. Because we're borrowing about 30% of all of our spending. We borrow about $72,000 a second. About $20,000 a second is interest. And next year, my math, and look, I'm a little more dour than some of the people around me, but my math has us closing in on $800 billion of borrowing, $800 billion of interest, just interest next year. And I'm going to show you a chart saying, please pay attention, that's almost defense. I mean, there was a time this place would have been losing its mind if I came to you and said, well, interest next year would be pretty much what we spend on defense. Oh, David, that could never happen. Ta-da! How many times have you heard anyone come behind these microphones showing any concern? Instead, we're going to do the theater on rounding errors. I'm going to stop another 50 million here. That's a big deal, fine. But don't think it does anything. Did I mention we're borrowing over $72,000 a second? Because this is really difficult math, and it's really uncomfortable. And back to my opening statement, if you're someone that doesn't like hearing something that's uncomfortable, please go watch something else. What's the primary driver of U.S. sovereign debt? Yeah, a bunch of it, at least the current cycle, is a bunch of stupid things the Democrats did last year when they had power here. But no, right now, today and over the next 30 years, what's the primary driver? It's our demographics. We got old. We made lots of promises. They're moral promises. They're commitments. And we don't have the cash for them. We don't have the cash flow for them. And we're going to run out of the borrowing capacity for them. But we're not allowed to talk about them because if you talk about them, you will get unelected around here. Because it's the see no evil thing. We had a president stand behind that podium on the State of the Union and say, you're not allowed to talk about Medicare and Social Security. And everyone got up and applauded. That was immoral. absolutely immoral. In 9 years, we doubled poverty in America. Last week I came here and was showing some stories of the number of baby boomers who are in retirement, who are living on the street. And in that article, it talked about how many more, I mean, it was a stunning number, how many more by the end of this decade are expected to be living on the street. This is retirement in America. And in 9 years, we cut the average couple's Social Security by $17,400. That's the morality of this place, but you're not allowed to talk about it because that's difficult. So, for those who are not good at math, but like pie charts, let's do this one. The entire discretionary budget, and this chart is a little off because it was some of the original, the actual fully appropriated discretionary budget was $1,831 billion, but we'll use the 1.7 because that's what they printed. But you got to understand, what you see in orange, members of Congress do not get to vote on. We should, but it was this politically safe thing to do is make Social Security, make Medicare, make veterans benefits. We'll put them on a formula. They just happen. But what we vote on is all of defense and the rest of what you think of as government, the State Department, the Supreme Court, our salaries. Every dime of that is borrowed. So that my point here is just very simple. If you have about 1.8, 1.7, that's the entire discretionary budget, including defense, and we're going to borrow $2.2 trillion this year. Every dime we vote on is borrowed, plus about $300 billion. Yay, team! And we'll have people here have little temper tantrums over rounding errors, because these numbers are so difficult and so hard to get your head around. We'll do the theater because the theater actually sells. So let's actually walk through how ugly some of this math gets. One of the things, and I've done entire presentations of this concept of interest rate fragility. If you have, remember I just showed you that we crossed over the $33 trillion of borrowing. Well, about 26, 27 trillion of that is what we call publicly borrowed. The rest is actually transfers from trust funds. So the money that's in the Social Security Trust Fund gets borrowed by the Treasury. Treasury gives them interest. So we'll make a big, we're going to pay 50, 60 billion at the end of the month. It's our monthly interest that we pay out to the trust funds for the borrowing. That's why I think my 2.2 trillion borrowing this year is correct. But you forget about all the other bonds that have to be refinanced. If any of you like to watch markets, go grab your phone, go grab it right now, and go look at what interest rates are right now on a U.S. 2-year. How about a U.S. 10-year? You're at the very top of the range. You are seeing interest rates that we have not seen in a dozen years. And that's what we're going to be refinancing. And here's the punchline. 9.6 trillion. 2 trillion of that will be sort of new issue, new borrowing. But the rest of that is what we call refinancing. It's the bonds that come due. So when we're talking about these higher interest rates, it's not on the new virgin borrowing. It's on almost 10 trillion of U.S. sovereign debt that's coming to market. And there was this old adage, I have a U.S. Debt instrument. I'm just going to, when it comes due, I'll just put it right back in. That's not what happens. You see foreign governments start to roll out of U.S. sovereigns, but you also see other people who say, look, I can get this interest rate, but now I can go buy corporate paper, or I don't trust U.S. inflation. I got to go put it some other place. If you're bringing almost 10 trillion to market in 2024, is there a chance of a stressed bond auction? Is there a chance of a spike in one? Sure there is. Now, we have some games that with the Fed and the Treasury we can play to gobble up an issuance. But the moment that happens, be prepared that the interest rates we have today look charmingly quaint. But this is the reality. This is what we've done to ourselves. But we're not allowed to talk about it because it requires math. I sort of already gave this one away, but let's do it anyway. So, the defense appropriation bill is about what? $830 billion. And our best guess is for interest is $800 billion next year. Think about that. I mean, I just need you to process. Do you remember the old days when you'd meet a liberal and the first words are, just raise taxes on rich people and cut defense spending, we'll be fine. But guys, interest now is pretty much equal to defense spending. Does anyone care? Will anyone talk about this? Will anyone pay attention? Or we just go back to our theatrics because there's no reporter that's going to write this. There's no blogger out there that's going to pay any attention to it. And look, you know, if you're selling clickbait on the internet, you're not going to do any of this. This requires an intellect. This requires thinking. May even require a calculator. And I've just grown so weary. How do you save a society? Because remember the very first slide, there's good things happening if we would embrace those things and run with it. I did entire presentations here week after week on showing, you know, if you took on diabetes, I even came here and talked about things you're not allowed to talk about. Took on obesity in America. Turns out it's the single most powerful thing from a debt standpoint and economic growth standpoint and morality standpoint of making your brothers and sisters healthier or letting them be healthier. Function got, I mean, a handful of academics were just thrilled to death that Schweikert's willing to talk about this. Everyone else goes, yeah, but it didn't make me angry. We basically, the political class around here on the left and the right, we just sell having people be pissed off. Great. Did I mention we're borrowing $70,000+ a second? Do you think that your anger is going to, and look, this is something, and I do this almost every day with reporters. The working middle class in this country has every right to be angry. It would be crazy if they weren't. They are poorer today than they were a couple years ago. If you live in my community, Scottsdale, Phoenix, and you're not making 20% more today than you were 2 years ago, you are poorer today. This is what the left brought upon us. And when they go, oh no, it wasn't us, it was supply chains, read your own academic papers. Even the most moderate academic papers say, yeah, about half the inflation came from the excessive spending the Democrats engaged in their insanely named Inflation Reduction Act. And now the last several months, it's 100% the derivatives of their excessive spending. Read your own literature. And there'll be big words. You might need a dictionary. To my brothers and sisters on the left, take responsibility for what you did. You made people poor. Now you want to know why they're angry. But when you start seeing numbers that we're going to borrow just next year, every dime equal to defense will be borrowed, does that not set off any alarm bells? And look, some of these next slides are going to start getting geekier and geekier, but they're trying to make a point. And this isn't Schweikert math. We grab these things from CBO and OMB and some of the academic institutions because we're trying to reach out there because it's been shocking. We spent hours and hours and hours today trying to work on the Medicare Trust Fund, which is gone in 7 years. You've got to understand, it's empty in 7 years. And how hard it was just trying to find out where, okay, if that's several $100 billion that goes to hospitals and the trust fund's gone, what is the cash flow, remaining cash flow able to cover? And we're going to have to spend another week working on that. You'd think that would pop. It's within 7 years. We couldn't find any decent research that was walking us through the math. That gives you an idea how sick this place is. With some of the biggest, these aren't little numbers. These are the types of things you plan decades for, except we're not allowed to talk about things like that. So look, been trying once again to sort of show even the numbers we know today. I'm not going to take a shot at CBO. CBO's job is to produce projections as they know it. But darn it, they've been missing the numbers. And first off, the interest rates we're at, we weren't supposed to be here right now. Remember, we were all supposed to be into the economic slowdown, interest rates were supposed to be falling. So we're even doing some math just sort of showing even some of our worst case scenarios, we're off by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in additional interest if we start using these current interest rates. So we did this one because this one's the simplest to understand. If interest rates rise by 1% over the CBO projections, remember, CBO's already missed the projections by, I think it's 1+%. The fiscal year, so 10 years from now, budget deficit will be about $500 billion more than we already expect. So are you prepared in the 10-year window, so 9 budget years from now, to functionally have a $3.7 trillion deficit? That's 9 years from now. And this isn't a projection, this is pretty much where we're at. $3.7 trillion in 9 years. Because our brothers and sisters on the left needed to spend lots and lots of cash, handed out, buy their votes, buy their industries, buy their love from corporate America, which they did. Set off inflation and won't admit it. They made people poor. Now they wonder why they're angry. And now we got to figure out how to survive this. So, let's actually walk through some of the Democrat solutions. How about we use this one? Even confiscating all income over $500,000. So we'll actually take, and first off, the deficit number here on yours is absolutely wrong, but this is an old chart. So if you took one of the Democrat proposals saying you make $500,000, the next dollar, it's all government. So you pay your regular taxes, and then if you make $500,000 or every dime, it's just government money. And it's federal government money, not your state and local. The federal government takes every dime of it. We're now actually seeing a deficit projection of a couple $2 trillion next year. Taking every dime over $500,000 produces about $1.5 trillion. It wouldn't even come close to covering this year's deficit. This is taking every dime over $500,000. Huh? But I was told by Bernie Sanders we'd be fine. And I've done this dozens of times, so I'm not going to belabor it. We've actually, one of the real ways you would do this sort of math is you do it by percentages of GDP, and we did those, and we walked people through showing that all the Democrat tax proposals of confiscating money or doing something, it's probably unconstitutional, we'll know probably this time next year, of taxing and confiscating unrealized capital gains, the oligarch taxes and those things some of the hard left are pushing, where you actually just say, well, you got a building, you have a family business, you owe us 8% of the business, But this is a chart, and this one's easy to find. Just go Google Manhattan Institute, Brian Riedel. He's done all sorts of charts like this, where you just take CBO numbers, OMB numbers, and make them sort of understandable. And you see all the little tax ideas don't get you anywhere close. But we can lie and pretend, right? So let's do a little more of this. As you start to understand the drivers of what's going on, remember I told you one of the deep, dark secrets we're not allowed to say. 100% of the borrowing that's scheduled for today through the next 30 years. Medicare is 75% of it. Social Security is 25%. No, that includes interest, so if you want to throw interest in there, but that's rolled into those, the financing of those programs. The rest of the budget's actually pretty much flat. And you look at charts like this, and you can find this one everywhere. I think we've even put it up on our website. You start to understand, when you start to see the explosion here, these three lines are net interest, Medicare, and Social Security. And everything else just lays flat or actually falls as a percentage of discretionary. But we're not allowed to talk about this because it doesn't fit the narrative where the political class has not told the truth. And let's be honest, those of us on the right, it's waste and fraud. It's foreign aid. And then the Democrats, rich people don't pay enough. I'm going to show some more rich people don't pay enough slides and show you complete fraud in math. And then there's the thing I'm fixated on, and I'm going to do more on Social Security because I'm not comfortable enough with my Medicare numbers yet. But you got to understand, Highway Trust Fund, well, that's gone in 3-4 more years. Okay, it's big, but it's not ginormous. The Medicare Trust Fund, we have gone in 7 years. It's big, but it's nothing compared to Social Security, which has gone in 9 years. Did anyone notice something there? The 3 big trust funds are gone within this 9-year window. How much discussion have you heard on how we're going to recapitalize these? We have a moral obligation to keep Social Security. We have a moral obligation to keep Medicare functional. Anyone here talking about how to do it? I have come behind this mic over and over and over and over, walking through how you could revolutionize the cost of health care. You got to be willing to legalize technology. Well, it turns out that upsets people because much of this is all about the money. But there's so many things we can do. There are so many good things happening out there. It's just, will we allow the good things to come to us before we've got ourselves in such a debt crisis that all we're doing is just paddling to survive? So, all right, let's do the thing that they train you the day after you get elected. A bunch of the really smart consultants sit down with you and say, David, welcome to Congress. There's this thing called a third rail. It has something to do with subways. I'm from the desert. We don't have subways. You're not allowed to talk about things like Medicare and Social Security because they'll run nasty ads about you and you'll get unelected. So let's tell the truth. Let's talk about Social Security. In 9 years, could be 8 years, this chart has a mistake on it. This is 2033, not 2034. In 2033, the Social Security Trust Fund has about a 25%, it's empty, and that causes about a 25% cut to the average recipient in America. This is 9 years away. That average cut will be $17,400. As we had testimony in the Ways and Means Committee, that will double senior poverty. Doubling of senior poverty is 9 years away. I was here on the floor last week already showing you that because of rents and other things and Biden inflation, you're already seeing the number of baby boomers in retirement who are ending up homeless. This is 9 years away. $616 billion. So when you show this to someone on the left, well, David, if we would just tax people over $400,000 a year and not give them any benefits, but we make them pay the entire 12.4% FICA tax, we're going to be fine. And then you do the math and you realize they've never actually put a calculator to that, have they? So one more time. In 9 years, $616 billion is the shortfall. In 9 years, everyone's getting a 25% cut. So let's do the first suggestion given to us by our Democrat colleagues. Just create a donut hole. You pay your FICA tax up to $160,200 today. It will go up with inflation over the next few years. And then you create a donut hole, and then people $400,000 and up, you get to pay the 12.4% tax. From that to the sky's the limit, whatever you make, but you get no benefits for it. Turns out our best estimate, and we have to work at these numbers to do this because for some reason no one wants to actually put these on charts. Our math comes out to about $86 billion. So you remember the chart before. Let's do this again. Sorry, but this is important because almost no one ever wants to talk about this. Do you see the $616 billion? That is the shortfall in 9 years. Taxing people the full FICA portion of Social Security at the 12.4 produces $86 billion. Does anyone notice a math problem? So let's do the hard left suggestion. David, we just need to get rid of that Social Security cap. So we'll let them have benefits up to that $160,200, but every dime above that still pays the 12.4% tax. But you don't give them any benefits. All right, so this is lifting the cap. And I've had some of the most arrogant leftists over and over say, and that solves the problem, does it? One more time. The shortfall in 9 years, as our estimate, is $616 billion. Lifting the cap, our best estimate, produces about $164.7 billion. You get about 20% of it. This is what the brain trust around here has as a solution. It's we're just going to force the Republicans to just lift the cap on Social Security taxes and it will be fine. Really? Really? So you have 27 billion dollars. You're still short. And that's in the first year. That's in 1 year. You're still doubling senior poverty at these numbers. And this is the left's plan for us? Come on, people. This shouldn't be Republican or Democrat. But we had a president get behind that microphone and say we're not allowed to talk about this. Please understand, it is absolutely just abysmal that we're going to spend the next couple of weeks doing theatrics and fighting out, and we'll scrape out some savings. But those savings are going to be tiny compared to the scale of this sort of nuclear debt bomb. And this isn't way off in the future. This is no longer about your kids and your grandkids. This is you. This is your retirement. So let's actually do a couple other pieces of math that really upset people, but it's math. Okay, we're going to do something called expected present values. Why this is important is you have a lot of folks who somehow believe that they've paid in stunning amounts of money into Social Security and Medicare, and they're getting cheated. In some ways you actually are, but it may not be what you think. So what we're trying to show is lifetime taxes, lifetime benefits. The blue here is that purple. This is Social Security, Medicare, Medicare. On Social Security, the average couple, you get every dime back plus about $72,000. Now remember, if 25 years ago when George Bush tried and he was absolutely nuked by the retirement, I got to come up with a name for the folks who basically want to nationalize retirement, and the Democrats, President Bush ran around saying, could we just take a sliver of it and allow people to have their own private account? Oh, you're trying to privatize. Okay, well, too late now. That window long past. So you're going to put in several $100,000 into Social Security through your taxes. If this is an average couple, it works their 40 quarters. You get about a $72,000 spiff. It would be several times more than that if over those working years you'd been allowed to put that 15% or so into a private account. But water under the bridge. This is the brilliance left's economics. Primary driver of debt, though, turns out this is the lifetime Medicare taxes. It's about $200,000. And we're still working on updating the number, but our newest number is maybe just shy of $700,000 per couple on the benefits they're going to get from Medicare. Someone see a problem? Average couple, remember there's 76 million baby boomers. That couple will put in a couple $100,000 in Medicare, and they're probably getting close to $700,000 in benefits. That gap right there is the primary driver of U.S. sovereign debt. Almost no one will ever tell you that. And I don't take you through some of the more the same. My reason I keep coming behind this mic, I truly believe there are people out there in the public that want to be talked to like adults. Yes, you like getting, the stimuli of having someone say something angry and crazy and, go out and burn down but that's not how you save the republic. There are ways to stabilize this. There are ways for this to be another American century. But that clock is ticking on us. You think we're going to recapitalize? If the Medicare trust fund is how many $1 billion of shortfall starting in 7 years? I just showed you Social Security is 616 in its first year. Transportation's also gone in that time. Plus, we're heading into $3 trillion year deficits at the end of the decade. We're going to do 2.2 this year. This is moving away from us very, very, very fast. And I do need people out there to understand the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion. Play with your calculator, see how many zeros are the difference. Don't let someone trying to get your vote pander to you by making crap up. If they're not being serious with you, because I will argue this is the thing that destroys your republic. This is what will make you much less free. This is what will take your freedoms from you, destroy your retirement, and heaven knows the misery we're leaving to our kids. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Does the gentleman have a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I move unanimous consent that we do adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning hour debate.